excess duty on airtime and data from 15% to 20%. They, however, rejected Treasury's proposal for higher taxes on bread and flour, but on the same breath backed a reintroduction of a 16% VAT on cooking gas and a 20% excess tax on the fees and commissions and on loans. Now, this means you're now paying at least 350 shillings more from 13 kilogram cooking gas, adding to the pain of costly energy. In a wild twist, however, the MPs also lowered Treasury's proposal to reintroduce excess duty on betting to 7.5% from 20%, saying the tax was punitive and was driving investors away. With all due respect, tonight, let's have this debate. We have Homa Bay County MP Gladys Wanga, who's also the chair of Finance and National Planning Committee, the committee that okays or rejects the government budget proposal, by the way. Economist Kwame Owino, CEO, Institute of Economic Affairs, and Wanjiru Gikonyo, National Coordinator, TISA, convener Okoa Uchumi, to help us into these issues. Gentlemen, ladies, let's start where we should. Let's start with you, Gladys Wanga. Here's the thing. These are too much taxes, and you're killing us. You're killing us with taxes. Why?
So, James, first of all, let me say that generally, as we speak right now, because of the global pandemic that we are in, life is generally much harder than it would have been if we didn't have a pandemic. People have lost jobs, businesses are not doing as well as they should be, people are struggling. So generally, we are in a situation where people are on the edge. It's like at home when there's not, enough for everybody. Everyone is on the edge. Everyone is easily angered. So people are really on the edge, and rightfully so. And this is a situation, of course, that's affecting us in this country, but also across the globe, really. It's a situation that's very difficult. I don't think anyone envies somebody who's a finance minister, for example, at this point in time. Because anytime you're making any decisions, you're walking a thin line of trying to raise revenue, while at the same time trying as much as possible to cushion your citizens from the effects of the pandemic, which are alive. So I think that's the context of where we are. So even as we were dealing with issues in the finance bill, which is now the Finance Act, we were very alive to the fact that we are on the edge. We have to raise revenue to finance our budget, while at the same time we have to deal with issues. But let me just say this. I mean, this particular Finance Act was very thin on new tax measures. It was very, very thin on new tax measures. Actually, a lot of what it did was exemptions. Exemptions of medicaments, exemptions of ventilators, things that are necessary, vitamin C, all the things that we are trying to use right now during the pandemic. There's a long list
I'll come to that.
Of huge exemptions in this particular bill. Then there are a few areas where, of course, there were additions in taxes, and a few areas where we agreed, with Treasury. There are a few areas where we differed with Treasury. So I think when we begin that discussion, and when we come to it, we will be able to explain. But I think we are where we are because of the, global situation that we are in.
Purely the pandemic?
The pandemic has really exacerbated the situation that we are in. All right. But there are issues that we must discuss also in terms of, are we going to just raise money through taxes? What's our budget looking like? Can we do less? Do we have to tax Kenyans for everything? The tax measures that we already have, are we exploiting them to the maximum? These are some of the questions we are also asking as a committee, because we are an oversight committee. If we say we are going to tax, for example, we're going to put rates on houses, or on rents, are we doing enough in that area before we come back and tax more?
Okay, let me get your views, Kwame. We've heard that the issues of where we are, the global pandemic, as the chair of Finance Committee, Gladys, says this is the context of our problem. Is it so? Is it the pandemic that has made everything impossible and why we are taxed the way we are taxed?
Obviously not. I think it's a mixed picture. The pandemic does not make anything easier, as Honorable Wanga has mentioned, and I concede that. But the truth is, the question Kenyans are asking on why this tax, we are having this discussion is because this is repetitive behavior of taxes changing every year. We know a new set of taxes are coming and stuff like that. But the tax rates aside, and there's much to be said about that, the complexity of Kenya's tax code. I mean, if you look at the Income Tax Act, for instance, which also changed through the Tax Procedures Act and many other things, it is now more than 1,200 pages. So in addition to just what the tax rates are, Honorable Wanga and her colleagues have added a motley of regulations and hoops that we have to jump here. Those things also cost. They have cost for money. So if you're a small enterprise and you employ, say, 15 people, just making sure that each and every one of them has returned taxes and has made all the other things here is something. And the role of Parliament to actually reduce the burden, even if not on tax, and there's a lot to say there, just the procedures alone that people have to jump right now, it has become more complex. And what that means is we'll never be able to solve this question of matching revenues to expenditure. Why? Because taxes change every year. They are so unpredictable. So the stability of Kenya's tax regime, which is something Parliament should do, Treasury is not interested because they need to get the money anyway, is something for which I still hold Parliament responsible. So it's just half the truth.
Half the truth. Where do you stand on this question? And the Kenyans are, watching and thinking. Obviously, it's very confusing. 1,200 pages later, we are unable to keep up with, the tax code and everything that is demanded of us. Where do we stand? We have to pay these taxes.
Well, I think there are several issues, but back to the primary question about are we being taxed to death and where is this coming from? Of course, this is the taxes that have been wrought on Kenyans are, and I'll say this because we are part of a coalition that has come together called Okoa Uchumi, because we've looked at the situation of public debt and the resultant taxation and said this is not sustainable. So we are taxing Kenyans to death to pay for the administration's irresponsible borrowing. And the finance measures that we are implementing are based on the harmful and deleterious IMF-sponsored initiatives around taxation, because we are in a fiscal consolidation program. So in fact, Honorable Wanga, alluded, it's not just the pandemic. It's not, because from 2019, Kenya was courting IMF. And Kenya was courting IMF because we were unable to pay our external debt.
Our responsible behavior.
Our irresponsible behavior.
Yeah.
Because our ability to raise revenue has, our deficit and our repayments of debt are not, our revenue is not able to keep up with this.
Yeah.
So as far back as 2019, we were talking to the IMF. And as soon as the IMF began talking to the government of Kenya, we saw the tax measures, we saw the pressure coming in. And there's a battery of taxes that was then introduced around then in 2020. And if I'm to just pick up where Honorable Wanga started saying, things are difficult. How do you then institute additional taxes? Why did government remove the exemptions that they had given to Kenyans, the cushions that had been given to Kenyans, as soon as they did? It's because they were courting the IMF, convincing the IMF that our debt is sustainable, we can pay.
Yeah.
But in reality, we've overborrowed. We borrowed on non-productive investments that cannot then pay back. We borrowed very expensively, and our tax collection has been going down compared to, the growth of the GDP. So the tax measures that the administration has introduced since 2013 are not working, and in fact, revenues are falling and have been falling. So the truth of the matter is we are dealing with a failed taxation policy. And unfortunately, the burden is falling on Kenyans. And there are options that government needs to exercise in order to balance the books, because the problem is we're not able to balance the books. The biggest problem is we're not able to pay our taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
Honorable Wanga, here's the question. And when we said we're going to have this discussion, the first comment that came through was, why does government and members of parliament don't feel that they need to tighten their belts first before they come and tax us to death, all right? That it's almost an irresponsibility that, members of parliament think that, we can get more taxes from Kenyans. That's what we feel. Yeah. How do you respond to that? And do you think that the government really is actually able to sustain itself if you don't get more taxes?
Well, I think the whole point around austerity and this is not really a members of parliament issue. I think it's a government issue. How do we bring down expenditure and cut our coat according to our size or according to our cloth? And I think that's a big debate that we've had every budget that we are, that Parliament is looking at is, how do we reduce non-essential expenditure, before we try and see how to raise more money. And I think we haven't done too well in trying to reduce expenditure.
We've not done anything at all.
I mean, we haven't done too well. I mean, let me say we haven't done too well in trying to reduce the expenditure side of things, and that's why this year we're dealing with a budget of 3.6 trillion. We are trying to spend on projects, and when you say cut down new projects, for example, there are areas in this country that have never had, road projects, or these are the projects. So if members are looking at it and saying cut down new projects, and the way development has happened sometimes is in a skewed manner. There are areas that have developed more. So you look at areas, even when you say cut down new projects, there are areas that there are constituencies that don't have a single kilometer of tarmac road, for example. There are people who are living without clean water. There are people who are living. So even as you say cut down this, then you have to look at other areas where you must bring up new projects. The other issues I wanted to speak to around the tax policy that Kwame raised, and right now government is the executive is still on the executive side looking at a tax policy or coming up with a tax policy that would create some sense of stability. Because one of the issues that Kwame was raising was this year you have an exemption, next year you don't. The other year, you have, a new tax, and so on. And so the business environment is unstable. So if you want to make decisions on investment, you don't know how to make them. And the tax policy is going to be able to guide, how to move forward in terms of taxation, what regime you're going to be operating in within a certain period of time, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, so that an investor or somebody who wants to invest knows what the regime is going to be. The income tax, I couldn't agree more with him. It's been amended so much that now it's amorphous. And one of the things that is coming up right now is overhauling of the Income Tax Act and redoing it. So right now we're going to be redoing it. But what I want to challenge Kwame, and I want to challenge when we are doing these things, they don't show up, So they come here and meet us on TV. Then they say, oh, okay, you should have done this. You should have. We were doing the finance, with all due respect.
With all due respect.
Yes, with all due respect. Let me say this.
In this program, people have to respond with all due respect.
No, let me just finish.
Yes.
For example, when we were doing the finance bill, which is now the Finance Act, I expected to see, Kwame coming before the committee and saying, if you dealt with this way, you removed this. This is where, because he's one of the sharpest economists we have in the country. If you remove this, maybe you can get some money from here. And I know, and I want to thank TISA because they did a huge memorandum. But I want to see them participating more, so that it's not just here, but it's in the actual process that can actually make the difference. Some of the suggestions of what we removed from the Finance Act, for example, were based on the public participation programs that we had, where people came and said, okay, you can remove this from here, but we can show you where you can raise some money from without pressing Kenyans further. So I think Kwame must come more.
Kwame, let me get Kwame to respond, and as you respond, also help us to provide this. And when we say this all the time, that Kenya does not have, a spending problem. Kenya has a spending problem, not, a tax problem. Please respond.
Okay, first, I think Honorable Wanga, she has a point as well. We actually sent a memorandum. There's an email address that was provided, and we sent a memorandum, which we also copied to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. So we need to find out where that went, but we did. A 5-page memorandum, and I had a copy of it here, but maybe perhaps the time has passed, but I'll still make sure that she gets it so that I can purge our honor as the Institute of Economic Affairs.
We are happy to facilitate that process. With all due respect, please pass it on, then we'll pass it on to the Finance Committee. But yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I think the other thing is, yes, we have a spending problem. So, for instance, if you're going to say that we're in a situation of the austerity that's required, or even if you say that COVID has forced on us, and that's true, COVID has forced on all of us the need to tighten belts. But last year, the government of Kenya spent 3 trillion, 3.1. This year, we are spending 3.6. So basically, in a situation of austerity, or rather a shock to the economy, we are spending an additional 2 billion shillings per day for the whole year. That doesn't strike me as parliament that's aware that actually there's a problem. So obviously we are deciding fat on what suits we want, and then we go look for the cloth, and then after that. So really, as Honorable Wanga says that we need to cut our coat according to our cloth, I think in this place we're just deciding on what kind of suits we want, and then we look for that for the clothes, whichever way, let's find it. By all means, let's just find what it is. So we have revenues chasing expenditures when the two should actually come together, including taking the brave steps, which is to reason with us as Kenyans and to tell us, look, the intention is to build every county, but it is not possible at this moment because we are not going to push out budgets that are too ambitious, which raises your taxes, and then tell you that the only reason we raised your taxes is to ensure that everybody has a kilometer of road. If we had some kind of program, and there is, then we can actually schedule them and say, look, in 2023, for instance, if this is available, this is how we go about it. But adding new programs when others are there is unacceptable. And I think the worst part of it is basically actually, this has been one of the most wasteful parliaments. So, for instance, I know Honorable Wanga has been here just a year and a bit, but one of the things it is. Let me say why. Yes. Let me say why. Then I'll stop. So, for instance, it is known that an estimate was provided to Parliament, which says that the incomplete projects that have been approved, under this administration, come down to about 9 trillion Kenya shillings. 9 trillion. 3 times what you're spending this year. Projects that have been approved but are incomplete. So why should we start new projects when you have 9 trillion lying on the ground as either white elephants and stuff like that? So Parliament hasn't performed that tight function of saying, look, it's we that Kenyans come to. These are the people we have to face every day when we visit our constituencies in the clinics, and they're telling us that this burden is too high. So if you're not even going to start these projects and complete them, why are we starting new ones? And if we need to cut, some tough decisions need to be made, but I think Parliament blinks every time the Treasury presents them with numbers. And that's the problem, Honorable Wanga. So you have some homework to do.
With all due respect, is this the most wasteful Parliament in history? We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with that question. Don't go too far.
Get yourself an aerial decoder plus 1 month free classic bouquet at only 999 Kenya shillings, or a satellite dish decoder plus 30 days free smart bouquet at 2,699 Kenya shillings.
Play on.
The best of July on Star Times. Catch the War of the Worlds on Fox. Brothers on Novella E. The best of movies on TNT and BDO. Bayab on Swahili Channel. Toonami and DreamWorks, the exclusive Bet King Premier League, Trace Music and Triple P to keep you in the groove, is all about your viewing pleasure. Get yourself an aerial decoder plus 1 month free classic bouquet at only 999 Kenya shillings, or a satellite dish decoder plus 30 days free smart bouquet at 2,699 Kenya shillings.
Shopping season is here thanks to Notify Mall. Shop from hundreds of online shops at our mega malls along Moi Avenue in Nairobi and Moi Avenue in Mombasa. Notify Mall, all your favorite online brands under one roof.
think about Molfix?
Actually, another brand was recommended to me, but it had a leakage problem. Then I decided to try Molfix. His clothes don't get wet anymore.
Because Molfix provides extra protection against leakage thanks to its anti-leakage elastic barriers. All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Molfix.
Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Ruiru Mabati Factory, you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Did you know Ruiru Mabati Factory offers free delivery countrywide within 72 hours? Call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
In a world of fake news, Kenyans need the truth. When Kenya's foreign debt goes through the roof, when our athletes cover our nation with glory on the global stage, when they steal from Kenyans in a pandemic, when Kenyans cannot breathe due to the high cost of living, you deserve the truth. The Daily Nation brings you the truth. We are bold for you, full of courage for you. We are resilient for you, telling Kenya's stories without fear or favor, because you deserve the truth. Daily Nation, the truth.
I warned you not to mess with me. You took away Perla. Now I'm gonna take the vid and put a stop to your wedding. Now we're even.
Are you crazy? No, wait, what? Where do you think you're going? Come back here!
Hey, come on, Leon, I need to help the vid.
Go.
I'll be right back. Rachela is a murderer. You are crazy, Juan. And by the way, your dear Lisa, she didn't drown. Rachela killed her.
If you make a commitment of 900K in any of their value-added projects, you get rewarded with a cool smartphone, bro!
Call us on 0790 300 300.
Cliffhanger. Hi. This is the most wasteful parliament in history. It's unable to control the executive, it appears. Members of parliament are out and they're complaining, like us and with us. We see them on Twitter, we see them in churches. I'm glad he's Wanga.
I think that's not a fair statement, especially the justification that has been given by Kwame, that of course there are pending projects worth, he said, 9 trillion. And I think there's been a major effort to try and focus on completing the old projects rather than starting new ones. So you find that even right now, what happened is there's a moratorium on new projects. But what I was saying is, and everyone is trying, by the way, to put as much resources, because if you go across the country, roads, for example, there are many contractors on site who are not able to move on with roads because of lack of, pending bills that they haven't been paid, certificates that haven't been issued. So a lot of focus in this budget, I must say, was on completing all projects. But I also gave you the practicality. Every member of parliament represents a constituency. I mean, nobody came to parliament to represent collectively. People represent constituencies. And as you look at the budget, and I was telling you during the break, the budget is a political tool. It's politics through and through. It's how you lobby for resources as a member of parliament to also carry your area along. So if you could go and tell Homa Bay people that, no, we are not going to have any projects in Homa Bay here because all the projects in Machakos must be completed. As a member of parliament, that's your straight ticket to go home. So, you must be able to lobby. And this is the practical truth of the matter.
I want you to hang on to that thought.
Can I?
Yes, please.
That's a very critical thought.
Yes.
Because we're in court, by the way, over that very issue, because what Honorable Wanga is alluding to is the role of the MP in implementing projects, the CDF being one of the examples. Now, part of the problem we have, and I agree with Honorable Wanga, is Kenyans equate political representation and development with projects, whether it's the MP, whether it's the governor, whether it's the president. So you have legacy projects here, At the end of the day, unfortunately, many of these projects aren't speaking to the policies because the PFM puts in place sectoral policies. It puts in place annual plans. Now, the projects are really being sometimes parachuted in on the basis of politics. We've seen that with legacy projects, and we've seen that across the board. Now, the role of Parliament is actually to ensure oversight and to help move us
on this question of the budget,
from this project mentality into meaningful investments. And the problem we have, and the reason why we are being pressed with regard to taxation, is not really because of the projects. Unfortunately, there's been investments, and some of those projects will not give us the returns. Unfortunately, some of those are white elephants. And much as Honorable Wanga may say there's been a moratorium, government has been talking about a moratorium on new projects for a while, and the executive still puts in new projects. In fact, the PBO did...
it doesn't happen.
Did the analysis, and on this BPS, they pointed out the new projects. And they pointed out the misaligned investments, because they're saying, look, you're spending a lot of money on infrastructure in a labor-intensive economy. Why not put the money where the people are? Why not put more money in agriculture? Why not put more money at the local level instead of doing kind? So we have a problem in terms of what we define and understand as development. There are too many interests around procurement. There are too many interests around shiny big projects. And that is something that we need to deal with. But if we are to look at what is driving the taxation, one of the big factors is debt. And that is what has driven us into a fiscal consolidation program. So we must not forget the fact. And unfortunately, Parliament and this budget, the Treasury, are operating as though it's business as usual. They presented a budget to us, like Kwame said, that's bigger. The expenditure, we have an expenditure problem. They've grown the expenditure. And Parliament complained, and then proceeded to approve it. So if you look at the growth in recurrent expenditure, it outstrips the growth in the development expenditure. So we have we are actually violating, Treasury presents a BPS that is not in line with the Public Finance Management Act. This is then approved at expenditure level through supplementary budgets. The money is shifted, further violating. So we have, between Treasury and between Parliament, there's a collusion really to eviscerate Kenyans economically, and Parliament, we must say the truth. Yes. They have betrayed the social contract because they are not performing their oversight role. So yes, it's politics, but at the end of the day, it's the pockets of Kenyans, it's the livelihoods of Kenyans, it's households that are bearing the brunt.
I want us to fix this political question, Kwame, because we cannot move forward, and I'll come to on Gladys' point later on what they've managed to do in this budget finance act 2021. But how do we view and address the misalignment between the politics, that Hon Gladys talks about and MPs talk about, that I'm in my constituency, I need a road, I need to build a hospital, I do all these things. I can't tell people in, my constituency that, we are not going to have quote-unquote development this year. And the question of the economy, and as an MP, I need to provide oversight. How do we fix this misalignment that it's almost like an impossible situation that we put ourselves into?
Okay, first, I don't think Honorable Gladys Wanga, Kenyans would agree, even the people from Homa Bay, that your only work in Parliament is to ensure that you grab something called part of the national pot and take it to Homa Bay. If you read the chapters of the Constitution, and I know you've read them, so I'm just clarifying this for Kenyans. If you read the chapters of the Constitution, there's no suggestion at all that a member of Parliament is expected to only perform functions and consider oversight that is related to the constituency they represent. So I think, yes, maybe that's the view you people have taken for a while. And we cannot say no, because that's where your thousands of votes come from, where you have to. But the point is, you are elected, and when you take your oath of office, you're taking your oath of office to the Constitution of Kenya and to the Republic, knowing that Homa Bay constituency is within that Republic. So I think members of Parliament have deliberately chosen to play small, to play the small game, which is to say, look, let me just keep my focus on Homa Bay. And let me tell you how it's harming you. So regardless of what promises Treasury will give you, for instance, that we are going to spend this amount of money to build, say, roads in Homa Bay or not. I'm just giving this as or to complete schools in Homa Bay and all that. If, as you know, members of parliament are in charge of this, the Constituency Development Fund, which is a very dicey thing, I actually think it brings your constitutional obligations too close to what execution is, and perhaps that's a constitutional problem. But you have completed the year, and yet the money that was supposed to be given for the projects that you planned last year at the CDF level have not been pushed. So if somebody in parliament is in the treasury, or rather in other parts of the arm of government, is giving Honorable Wanga the courage or the encouragement to think that your only work is to defend the interests of the people of Homa Bay because they must see physical projects, then the behavior of the executive regarding transfers, both to the county and specifically to the constituency, tells you that they've given you the short end of the stick. So I think members of parliament in general must think about, you are the guardians of the past. Section 209 is very, very clear. You can tell Treasury, we don't care what you plan, because the budget is a plan. But the people who hold the pass are us in the finance committee generally, and in parliament as a whole. So you decide what you want to. But if we are not going to open the pass to give you that money, then I think we need a discussion. So I agree with you, it's a political discussion, and that's how it should be. In mature democracies, it is understood that budget making is a political process as well, because it involves those trade-offs and everything that you need to make. Yeah. So for as long as you are divided in thinking that you must only care for those little 300 constituencies in which you spend some little money, and then the national government or the executive branch of government actually ends up spending 1.6 trillion and gives you simple amounts, you'll be an ineffective parliament. And perhaps that's something that parliament should consider more seriously in the new term, but also as you complete this term.
Great. On Gladys, do you accept you hold the pass? And to bring you to your point.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
This Finance Act, we've only seen what you've agreed Treasury can take. What did Treasury actually want? Just give me 2 or 3, and the one that your committee said we can't have that.
Yeah, let me first correct the misconception that we only look at our constituencies, and that is one of our roles of representation. My role of representation is to the people who elect me. I am their voice in that place, and that is why every single constituency has a voice in the House, because that is the representation law. It is sacred, just as oversight is. And oversight is a national duty. As chairman of the Finance Committee, I don't look out for Homa Bay. I look out for the country. I look out for the taxes for the entire nation. So when I said what I said, it was not having the understanding of my role as a member of parliament and the national role. And that must be understood. And I know my role as a legislator, and I bring a lot of legislation. That legislation is not for Homa Bay, it's for the country. I know my role as for oversight, and that I perform in my position as member, but also right now in the position I hold as chair of the Finance Committee, and that I do for the nation. My role of representation is to be faithful to the people of Homa Bay County who sent me to be their voice on the floor of the House. So that is what I meant as far as that was concerned. So that should be very well understood. But coming back to the point.
On that issue, if you'll allow, I think Kwame has actually supported that. But the point he was making is that there is a responsibility, despite the representative role, this parliament needs to be guided by the Constitution and not guided by the sometimes the citizens may not be fully appraised of the new direction that the Constitution is taking us. And so when Parliament then plays, he put it, you go for the easy road, where you say we're going to deliver projects, instead of saying we are going to work in a constitutional setup, whereby you need to look at development holistically. So what we are saying is actually parliamentarians, and you as a representative, have a responsibility to open up the thinking of your constituents so that they appreciate
the new dispensation.
The trade-offs.
Right.
But Parliament didn't do that. They went for the easy road.
And I appreciate, and I think we are all on the same page on this matter of our responsibilities as holders of the pass, for example. Making sure that, and Kwame, said it right, that you can tell Treasury that, look, we're not opening this pass until we are agreed that, how are we going to raise this money, for example. The issue of debt, which Wanjiru has raised over and over, is a big concern, because one of the things that was raised is the moment we pass a 3.6 trillion budget, for example, in the House, then we definitely have inadvertently approved debt. I mean, we've approved borrowing inadvertently, because the moment you say the moment you say finances, and we know that KRA is going to raise 2.1 trillion, and we know that
1.7 more realistically,
and so on. So when you look at that, then you know that there's a 900 billion there, or 1 trillion that you're going to have to borrow.
Why hasn't there been pushback then? From Parliament and from yourselves? Why hasn't we've not seen the pushback until Treasury? And this is the point that you're raising.
Well, I think there's a lot of push and pull in Parliament. Some of it that is not seen, but there's a lot of push and pull. There's a lot of debate on these issues. Like this particular budget, for example, was a big one. There was a lot of push and pull from all corners, and there had to be a lot of consultation and a lot of just coming together for it to pass as it was.
What Kenyans were saying,
with things,
Kenyans saying that it's not enough. It's not enough. We still are in 3.6. Last year at 3.1, so it's still not enough. So the powers that be still have won.
Yeah.
And still concerned that the revenue projections are not realistic.
And
because they're not realistic, there's too much pressure on Kenyans to hit an unrealistic revenue projection to meet expenditure.
In fact, I think I think the revenue projection is understated. Okay, if you asked me as chair of finance committee, because this year, despite the for the period that we had cushions and exemptions and so on, we still we had a target of about 1.7 trillion. We still managed to come very, very close, if not even hit it. This particular
with the exemptions.
With the exemptions for half the year, or for 3/4 of the year. This year we're talking about 2.1 trillion. I feel that KRA can do better. And one of the positions that we hold, for example, as a committee, is apart from just the new tax areas, where are the gaps? And we have visited, we have gone round this country. Right now, there's a report that we have passed on the floor of the House on optimization of revenues. If we went, for example, to Malaba border, for example, and we found that the Kenyan side has no scanners. The Ugandan side has scanners. So the Kenyan side is waiting for images from Uganda so that they can see if people are hiding contraband, in their lorries and so on. That's a small investment. Uganda's revenue is 600 billion in Kenya shillings. That's only what our customs alone raises. Yet they have made investment, for them to be able to raise revenue, investment in technology. And these are some of the recommendations that we've made, that we need to make investment. You need to put your money where your mouth is. We need to make certain investments in technology that will seal gaps in revenue collection. But for example, if we invested an additional 100,000 shillings in KRA, for example, to hire people to go and collect, rents and so on, and rates and what have you, they would raise, just with 100,000, you can raise $1 million. Just that kind of investment. So we need to look at some of these things as well. But coming back to the question that you asked, because, James, I feel as Parliament that we are always under siege. Is it somebody who said siege? We're always under siege. And anything good we do is not seen. Everything bad is thrown at us. So sometimes you say, so now what's this? Because, like now, this finance bill, for example, Wanjiru, Kwame, when it came, we had bread, had been moved from zero-rated to exempt. And that's a basic need. We had flour, where, zero rating had dropped 6 months ago. We had motorcycles, you know, moving from whatever to 15%, a percentage, which was going to be more costly for our people.
Yeah.
So we had things in here that were going to be more hurtful. So at the end of the day, as a committee, we took a position that we are going to start from the very basic, moving upwards. So you talked about airtime, for example. So we said, okay, unga, calling, eating or calling. So we started on that priority list coming up, and we had to look for ways of sealing the gaps in revenue that we created by protecting Kenyans from this taxation on bread, on flour, wheat flour, on motorcycles, and so on. So that must be appreciated. So the context within which gas, for example, is being spoken about. Gas was not in this finance bill. Gas was a matter that was passed in 2020. Only its implementation was postponed to 1st of July 2021. It was not in this particular bill. So I think, as you said earlier, we don't pay attention to the processes, and then, you know, when they happen, we say, huh, what is this that has happened?
But I mean,
so we try, and it was said that we are not looking out for Kenyans. We are at all times.
How can you be
I have
looking out for Kenyans when they are taxed more?
I have just given an example.
But
so,
Parliament,
we are.
The bread tax wasn't instituted. The changes in the taxation on border wasn't. But then the digital tax also hits Kenyans.
Yes,
because that turns out to be one of the biggest household items. So Parliament gave with one hand and took away with the other.
Which digital tax?
But the point,
the DST, we exempted local companies. So anybody doing
airtime tax,
the one on airtime,
the airtime tax now turns out
20%,
to be
yes,
and it
was a
then
5%
affects yes, but then it affects so many things, the knock-on effect. So this at a time when, and I'll give a statistic here. Kenyans borrowing on
Mshwari
has gone up.
As you go forward on
just hold your thought on Fuliza
to
351 billion on Fuliza ending March.
Right.
This means that Kenyans are in financial distress. So I totally agree with what Honorable Wanga is saying, that there are loopholes. Why hasn't Parliament pushed back against the new taxes? You know, taxes like turnover tax.
That's what we're
businesses
looking for.
Are struck. Why not? Why haven't they then taken a position? Even if it means commissioning the necessary data to be able to push back from this tendency to add on additional taxes on Kenyans on essential goods, because this is what we are seeing. More tax on essential goods as opposed to sealing the loophole.
Kwame, let's bring on to this discussion. We're having a bit of, you know, a misunderstanding, with all due respect. Have we done enough, as Gladys Wanga and her colleagues done enough to cushion Kenyans? As she claims, we pay her, by the way. So we
can ask.
We can ask. So have they done enough? Has Parliament really done enough to cushion us from these vagaries of, you know, economy and pandemic or whatever it is?
No, I mean, I have to say that again, respectfully. Let me give the example. So Honorable Wanga herself has stated that there's a tax that was supposed to apply to bread and, VAT rather, from zero rated to exempt, and was going to apply to bread, and it was going to affect that. So one of the things that does is, if you had rejected that tax and then told Treasury, cut back your cloth by this amount because we have saved this, say, 7 billion or whatever amount, then that would be saving Kenyans from tax. But what you've done is simply given us the impression that you do not approve of that tax and then transfer that tax somewhere else. So Kenyans are still paying for it. So basically, that's just basically what we call a zero effect, in the sense that you've just changed who's paying for it, but the tax somebody else will still have to bear. And that's what tells you that what that means is that the creep upwards on people's pockets has actually risen. So that's the idea. So let's look at it again. One of the other things that I think the Parliament needs to take responsibility for, in traditional thinking in economics and public economics, basically, which deals with taxation and budgets, one of the things that you call an excise tax is usually something that's supposed to be discouraged. So you know some of the products that people think about as that. So say, for instance, things that harm health, things that harm people's health, harm the environment, you actually apply an excise tax on them because you want to reduce the level of use or its consumption. I just want Honorable Wanga to explain to me as a Kenyan, why does an excise tax apply to somebody who's borrowing money for investment And why does excise taxes apply to somebody who's making a phone call? And what this tells you is that because of the creep, whether it's by debt, and debt is actually just a big part of the problem, but not it. In general, there's a creep in public spending going up every year. We have searched for all sorts of places to tax, and now we've come to use excise taxes as a general revenue instrument, just to gain extra revenue, as opposed to earlier, when excise taxes were simply applied on very specific products, sometimes at very high rates. And so how does it make sense to tell me that you're raising excise taxes on people using mobile telephony services and internet services, which some people use for businesses, some people even use it for accessing health services, and then you've reduced it on gambling? Honorable Wanga, that doesn't make sense. And it's impossible to, or rather, it's difficult to convince me, maybe I should hear from you, but it's difficult to convince you that when you pass this finance bill, you are watching our backs.
Yes, that's a direct question, Honorable Wanga. I think you can handle this. You can dispense with this in a minute or less.
Yes, and we were watching the back of Kenyans, and that is why we had the reductions that we did. And I want to agree with Kwame as far as excise taxes are concerned, that excise taxes are supposed to be used on, sin, leisure and sin, and sin items and so on. But the way, over time, there's been encroachment, and this is something we have to handle as the Finance Committee of Parliament in consultation with Treasury. We have to handle how to reduce, how to move excise away, from, and it's not an introduction of this year, of course, and I think that's what Kwame meant. Over time, we've been introducing excise, like the excise on airtime has been, an introduction over time, and now it was, increased. And so I agree with Kwame that the principle of excise should not be, on necessarily day-to-day matters, and that's a matter that we must seriously, very, very seriously, look at. On the issue of lotteries and so on, and if you look at that particular section, what we did, if you look at the Betting and Lotteries Act, there are 4 forms of gambling. There is gaming, there is betting, there is lotteries, and there is prize competition. This calling on radio stations that you call and you'll win this. So what we did was to, rather than just focus on one area, which is what was going to happen on a 20%, we said we spread this out so that we have betting, we have gaming, we have prize competition, we have non-charitable lotteries, all of them at 7.5%, coming to a total of 30%. So that was the point there. It wasn't to cut it down. It was to increase it, but then not to leave out some forms of gambling. Every gambling form should actually be taxed. And this was tax on stake. So it's not actually the companies. We wanted to increase the taxes paid by betting companies, but this is tax on stake. So when you stake your money, that is taken away. So again, it's if wherever you stake, if you stake 100, it's considered 7.5, and that is why we distributed it across and moved it from the 20% that was intended to 30%, where now there's increase even in the monies. So
let's address the question of the zero effect, because that's an important point on how you did not watch our backs. I mean, with all due respect, you're just saying that the taxman and Treasury came and said we want 3.6 trillion. What you did is give that 3.6 trillion without pushback and said, instead of you paying it on UNGA, you'll pay it on airtime.
No, what we did, and what we saved on UNGA and what we got on airtime, there's a very big difference. That was just a small part. What we did in addition was also to, in trying to protect our local industries, also increase, taxes on a lot of imports that we are getting. So at the end of the day, when we increase taxes on imports, and that is why we raised some of the money, and we didn't raise all of it. Some of it Treasury has to look for, but we really did try as much as we could in the best possible way to watch our backs. Only that we prioritized. We said food first, other items can wait, but first let's make sure Kenyans are fed.
And the thing,
at the basic level.
Yeah, at the basic level. We have this point that every time we talk about, economy and how we're not doing well, Kenyans asked, save more. You're not saving well. You need to put your money, and, suffer now, when you grow older, you'll reap all these benefits. where's this conversion coming from? It almost appears that we're told there's another Kenya, there's a heaven when you die, that you're supposed to struggle in this country.
Well, I haven't heard that language in a while, because obviously government knows that it's not giving Kenyans the option to save. I think Kenyans survived COVID because they ran down their savings, and this is on record. If you're looking at 80% of Kenyans working in the informal sector, businesses were hit. Informal sector traditionally relies on social support systems to recover from the numerous economic and other crises they face. That is why I was giving these statistics that Kenyans have gone on to Fuliza. That's an overdraft. It's not even a proper borrowing. That is, borrowing under duress.
And Tala and Branch.
Under duress. So you're talking about 351 billion borrowed by Kenyans. So how do you say you're watching Kenyans back? It looks like there were efforts to temper the Treasury's recommendations, but then the fundamental issues were not addressed. And the fundamental issue is the deficit that this country, the budget that we've been running on the budget, and is the causes under that deficit that need to be addressed. What could the Finance Committee have done? Number one, the policy that Kwame mentioned has been long overdue. And so, when you're sitting and you're making decisions without an overarching policy that looks at the impact of various taxes on different sectors, then you're actually working blind and you're making decisions on the spur of the moment or on the short term.
Right.
So one, that policy was long overdue, but given the situation we are now, I think it's closing the loopholes. That CS himself said, in 2018, we lost 600 billion to incentives and exemptions. And we know some of those are political. And even as we are telling Kenyans austerity, we are giving further incentives and exemptions to the Japanese. A number of tax exemptions go on. So there is a very, very major disconnect. And I think Parliament is more interested in from where Kenyans sit, they're increasing their allowances, increasing their family allowances. So there's such a really taking Kenyans for granted.
But I think this issue of increasing allowances is also another unfair statement.
We'll come to that.
Because there's no, SRC sets our allowances.
Okay,
and they set it in 2017 when we came to Parliament.
Right.
It's never been increased.
Okay.
So I don't know where this comes from that
it
we are
comes from
increasing
austerity.
our...
When you're in austerity,
that we are increasing our allowances.
When you're in austerity,
surely
everyone has
with all
to
due
sacrifice.
respect,
why is it Kenyans that are
with all
sacrificing?
due respect, we have not increased any allowance. So I think if we are discussing the tough times, it should just be discussed in that context without making MPs look like they are increasing allowances. Hang
on to this thought, because
I think
when you've touched on the question of savings, for instance, I just want to read a couple of tweets, then we circle back. Because this is one thing that comes up. It's a push of responsibility to Kenyans. And Ayo Ngundu on Twitter says, with the high cost of living and doing business, it's tough saving, all right? And Diwa Larry says there's nothing to save. Telling Kenyans to save is an insult. Where's the money to save? What work or jobless? That's Bethel on Twitter. Kwame, I want to come back to you to finish this point. This pushing of responsibility to Kenyans keeps on happening, and we seem to be discussing and circling back every so often on where is the space of Kenyans? How do we find ourselves, in a place whereby we are essentially, hands tied in the back and we have to cough more and give more, year after year, because our government is unable to, hold itself and spend within its means. Kwame, how do we fix that as we start to circle back and wind down?
Well, I think my view is that we are citizens and we have representatives. And often, I think those representatives must reflect. Because the point about this is that the discussion that the Treasury should have with the Finance Committee on one side and the Budget and Appropriations Committee and the whole of Parliament is that, look, it doesn't matter what we want to buy. It doesn't matter what the plans are. Our people and those we represent who are real human beings are prepared to take the debt burden that you're giving them. And because we have power under Article 209 of the Constitution, which says that no taxes may be done unless through an act of parliament. We therefore will not approve that act that allows you to borrow on the one side, because one of the ways parliament, this gets covered is because we raise some amount of money and then the rest is borrowed, which means it's borrowing through future taxes, and borrowing also has to be approved by parliament. So it's just basically that tough discussion. So in my view, we as Kenyan citizens need to find a way, whether it's to plead, but to convince members of parliament that we don't want higher taxes. Don't tell us things about, we'll make sure that there are more roads. Fine, whatever it is, please give us the best that you can out of 2 trillion shillings. We are not prepared to pay more than 2 trillion shillings. I give that as an example, because my view is this: even if you leave aside what the president says that 2 billion is lost every day, I think now it's been corrected that you're speaking as a metaphor. If you look at the Auditor General, you actually almost think that that's how much is lost anyway.
Yeah.
What Parliament should be saying is, look, Kenyans think the burden is high. So let's collect as much as we can, convince each other to pay, seal the loopholes, and then we work efficiently with the amount of money in our hands. There's no reason for us to chase a deficit of 600 billion every year. That's a huge, 900 billion every year. That's a lot of money. So I don't think Kenyans should be lied to. We should just simply say, this is what we are prepared to collect. And because this is what we are prepared to collect and seal the loopholes, this is what we can buy. And this is the track plan that we are going to use.
All right. Final thoughts. Should we accept this is the best we can get?
Of course not. And I think the awareness that we need to create in Kenyans is that there should be no taxation without representation. And we are not getting proper representation because the public participation process during the budget process is not delivering the results that Kenyans want. We are getting paper budgets where you have promises on paper, but then through the supplementary budgets, government is implementing something entirely different. We are having a rebasing of the economy that's not really based on real data. So you're having projections for tax collection that aren't based on the ability of Kenyans to pay. So no, I think we need to really sensitize Kenyans on the need for them to stand up and to push back and to say enough is enough. And make sure we hold our political leaders to account because they're taking us for granted.
Let me hold the political leader in the table to account.
Yeah, and in fact, the solution to our problems is not blaming Parliament from morning to evening. And as I said, these processes that Parliament goes through are open processes. I want to see more of Kwame, not on TV, coming to parliamentary committees, giving his views there. I want to see TISA making memorandum after memorandum, coming to committees, so that when we debate here, we say, Honorable Wanga, when I came to your committee, these are the views that we gave, and these are the views that the other people gave, so that even as you hold Parliament to account, those of us, because not every Kenyan can participate, can carry out public participation, and I can tell you, and you said that public participation is not what it is. The power of public participation is very, very high. Let Kenyans' voices be heard. Let it not be a parliament bashing process. It won't achieve results. Where Parliament does well, like we did the other day, that House did the other day, standing up to Treasury, Parliament should be commended. Where it falls short, it should be told off. And we are not afraid to be told off because we are servants of the people. We work at the mercy of the people, the Kenyan people who have given us that privilege, and we are happy to be corrected. But we also would like to see, even your own child, if you cane them all the time, whether they pass or they fail, they are likely to just go into failure mode. So I think the civil society must come out of activism alone. Because even if you made Kwame Minister for Finance today, he would have to make these tough decisions. And not every Kenyan would be happy with him. And that is the truth. So let's balance it and let's not make it a bashing game. Activism and reality, two different things. So wacha tutembee tu pamoja. This Kenya is for all of us. It's for all of us, and we all must walk in it together. I
am afraid Kwame has 10 seconds to respond. If you are the finance minister, you'd fail.
I'd make totally different decisions. But let me just say this. If I view Gladys Wanga, let me tell you that one of the countries that is admired, Hong Kong and Singapore, the tax code for Hong Kong, because I've seen it, is 25 pages, all taxes.
Yes.
And they collect just about 14% of GDP, which is close to what we collect. So I think you can take it as your personal initiative while you're still chair to make sure that we get something close to that, and we'll help you certainly to do that. So when you've done well, definitely that will be a star on your label, and we'll be prepared to give it to you. Thanks.
All right. Let's get to this point in a minute or less. Hilary Ngweno, a veteran journalist, bowed out this week. You know, a veteran journalist, editor, responsible for some of the most audacious journalism this country has ever experienced, passed on. William Boniface Ngweno was 83 years old when he died. Ngweno was the recipient of a lifetime achievement just last December at the 3rd annual convention of the Kenya Editors Guild. The citation for his award noted his immense contribution to the development of Kenyan media, and also he singularly trained some of the best journalists Kenya has ever produced. He was the first African editor-in-chief here at the Nation where I work. A lot will be said about this man, but what he did, maybe another journalist will not achieve half of what he did in this lifetime. Let me tell you about one story that demonstrates the impact of this man. Now, through his groundbreaking magazine, The Weekly Review, he introduced for the first time expert political and economic analysis for Kenyan readers. So founding the paper was an immense milestone, but it was what the paper covered in 24 years that really is what I want to briefly draw attention to. So let me pick 3 stories. First, the paper boldly told the investigations into the killing of J.M. Kariuki's murder. No other journalist in the day dared to touch this story. Secondly, when Vice President Moi assumed office and became president, the paper prophesied, quote unquote, and some accused it of campaigning for Health Minister Mwai Kibaki to be selected vice president. It spoke of a rising star and a sharp economic mind. In effect, without this weekly review, there wouldn't be a Mwai Kibaki. Thirdly, and I'll tell you this story in a bit of a detail, when the HIV and AIDS epidemic worsened in the 90s, killing millions, 2 Kenyan scientists announced they had invented a drug that cures AIDS. Professor Arthur Bell of the University of Nairobi and David Koech. The then Cambridge director said they had been working on the download and announced that we have a drug ready for use. This was exciting news. Kenyan scientists inventing HIV drugs was big news. Media and the entire society ate this story up, as you'd imagine. It was shot in the arm that the country needed. And the drug Cameron seemed to be working. Patients who were given the drug reported a change. So Professor Arthur Bell and David Koech took credit, and the praises kept coming. Everyone was happy, until they were not. Hilary Ngweno and his weekly review team discovered that patients only responded better for a period of time, but the drug didn't clear the virus, as it was advertised and promised. They had to let the nation down and report on this clever fraud. As you can imagine, it wasn't the most popular thing to do that time. There's more. The 2 scientists had also lied that they invented this wonder drug. In fact, Cameron was a drug given to them by an American veterinary researcher. Such was the man's grit and sense of duty to journalism that even when the entire country was being fed some Kool-Aid, he took a chance to say and report the unpopular truths. And he did this all the time. So Hilary Ngweno was not just another journalist, he was the quintessential journalist that had 2 things, editorial independence and journalistic venture at his core. While all his media investment failed, in his own words, he said, and I quote, "We were just journalists following the most important story of our time and failed to appreciate business realities." End of quote. What a lifetime of lesson for journalistic performance and excellence. We are just journalists following the most important story of our times. Rest in power, Hilary Boniface Ngweno. And to my guests, thank you very much for coming. Kwame Owino, CEO, Wanjiru Ikonyo, TISA, and Gladys Wanga, Chair, Finance Committee. You've all done well. Let's do this again, all right? And hopefully the next time we can figure out how to make Kwame the CEO, the CS of Treasury, and see if he can do best. With all due respect, that's how we wind up tonight. Thank you very much for your company at home. We'll do this all over again next week, same time, same station.
This is NTV.
Presenting the new Harpic bathroom cleaner. Compared to ordinary detergents, its thick formulation gives you superior cleaning and kills 99.9% of germs and viruses all around the bathroom. Blue
for the toilet.
And red
for the bathroom.
We are Team Kenya. You win, we win. So buy any Tusker. Take your marks. Check it in your Bekele. Get set. Tuma code to 29844 and win up to 80 million shillings in prizes. Cash, Team Kenya replica jerseys, and our sports shoes. Amazing Kenyan holidays. You can also leave a message of support